Welcome to another episode of Office Hours, the recap, where we go a little deeper into the discussion that we had in our Discord room over on chatbotbuilder.ai. Let's get started. Okay, so you're building out an AI solution, right? Maybe it's a bot, something to screen out job candidates or maybe capture leads from a landing page. You get some conversation part working, the bot's chatting away, and then you hit a wall. It's always the same challenge. How do you get the bot to reliably pull out specific bits of info that you need from the conversation without it totally going off the rails? A real human conversation is definitely not always a clean question and answer. It's often messy. And that exact challenge, this core task of effectively capturing user data inside your AI bots, that's what I'm digging into today. It's just fundamental if you want these bots to be actually useful for a business. Real conversations don't stick to a perfect script, do they? People wander off topic, they give these broad answers instead of just a yes or a no. Or maybe they just start asking their own questions back at the bot. And then it makes getting reliable data way more complicated than just, ticking down a list of questions. So faced with that messiness, what's the first tool or method that people usually reach for? The simple approach, right? A static message that asks one question that should have one expected answer or maybe a yes or a no button. Or maybe a few options to choose from 3 or 4 buttons. Then you can bump it up a little with a method called get user data, depending on the platform that you're building on. That's kind of a straightforward one. It's designed basically to grab info one question at a time and then save it into a custom field. You set it up expecting a very specific answer to a specific question that you just asked. It saves that directly into one single custom field. So if the data you need is really clear, unambiguous, like asking for an email after you explicitly said, I need your email, this method works pretty well. If you just need one clean piece of data at a time, and you're asking a really clear question for that info, it's pretty cut and dry. This method's effective. It's less likely to break, and it's built for those distinct bits of information, like email, name, phone number. If you want to chain a few simple questions like that together for predictable data points, you can create a function. At least in Chatbot Builder, you can. Now, where does it start to fall apart? Because, yes, real conversations aren't always that neat. That's the major weakness. It's a quite rigid approach. So if the user goes off on a tangent, maybe gives a really long, rambling answer, or asks something totally unrelated, or just doesn't get the answer in the exact way the function expects, it's highly likely to just fail. It won't get the data correctly. It's not really built to understand the overall meaning or the user's intent from a wider conversation or chat. It's just listening for the answer to one specific question that it asked. Okay, so if you ask for their name and they reply with something like, why do you need my name? The function just gets completely thrown off. Just not suitable if the question or the answer you expect needs any kind of interpretation or if there's a broad aspect to it. Think about asking, for instance, a company name. If the user just types back LOL, the simple function might literally save LOL as the company name because it has no context. It can't understand that the user wasn't actually giving the name. This is where the prompt instructions become increasingly important for the AI to recognize it didn't get the expected answer. So the get user data and functions are good for the easy stuff, but they break down when things get unpredictable. So that naturally leads us to the other approach, JSON data capture. I know you guys are all saying, oh my gosh, that's scary, I don't want to do it, but this is where you give the AI a lot more context to work with. So instead of just listening for one specific answer right now, you actually tell the AI block, the bit in your bot builder where you're giving instructions to the AI model, you tell it to save the whole conversation, or at least the entirety of that conversation that they're in that segment. Maybe just the last few conversations into one single custom field. It sort of keeps a running transcript of the chat, and it saves that entire block of text. Then, and this is the important part, separately, you define what's called a JSON structure. You're going to think of it as a template or maybe a map. And this map tells the AI what specific pieces of data you're actually looking for within that whole chunk of the conversation text. Things like name, email, what service are they asking about, maybe their budget, whatever you need. And it also tells the AI which custom fields to save those extracted bits of information into. So the AI gets the full context, the whole back and forth, and then it uses the map, your JSON map, to go back through and pull out the specific things you told it you're looking for. That's the key difference. The AI processes the entire chunk of conversation, that entire body of text that you saved. And it uses the JSON structure you defined to identify and pull out the data points, relying on the understanding of the user's overall intention as expressed throughout the conversation. This works much, much better if the conversation tends to go back and forth, or if the user tends to deviate, or if the answers you expect are naturally broad or might contain several pieces of information all mixed up together. And with this JSON method, the questions that I actually ask the user aren't really rigidly tied to that JSON structure like they were with the function method, not in the same strict way. In the function method, the actual questions that you phrase to the user, those are usually part of the overall bot prompt and the conversation flow that you design. You're guiding the user toward giving you the info that you need. But the JSON structure itself, that just defines what you're trying to extract from the resulting text. It doesn't dictate the exact question that got the text or how it was asked. So it gives much more flexibility in how the chat can actually unfold. Let's say, for example, you're building a bot for a landing page for a lawn care company. How would JSON help there? For a lawn care company, people hitting that landing page might have all sorts of broader inquiries, right? They might ask about a whole wide range of offerings or what your services are. Maybe they mention services that the company doesn't even offer yet. Like, hey, do you guys also handle tree removal, or is it just lawn mowing and trimming? That's not a simple data point, right? If you just used a simple function saying select your service, mowing, trimming, fertilizing, it would completely miss that whole part of the tree removal conversation. But with JSON, you can capture the whole conversation segment, including that question about tree removal, and your JSON structure could be set up to look for keywords or concepts related to services requested. And then save it somewhere like in a Google Sheet cell or in a doc that will summarize those points that were part of the conversation that weren't actually defined as something you were going to put into a custom field. So now you have this whole other body of information in this, say, miscellaneous custom field that you can draw from to do things like, get really valuable insight straight from your customers. You can actually see, based on what the user demand is coming through that other information, maybe a potential new service area you might want to consider expanding into. And in the lawn care scenario, it's a really good one to test your JSON skills with, precisely because it involves handling those kinds of diverse, broader, sometimes unexpected inquiries. So JSON is definitely more powerful for these complex, messy situations. But JSON's a bit more involved in setting it up compared to just plugging in a single question function. It's not, like flipping a switch. Implementing JSON well means you first have to carefully define that structure. What data do you want? What are you going to call the fields where it gets saved? And then, of course, you have the ongoing challenge of getting the AI to consistently and reliably extract all the different pieces of information that you've defined in that structure. This requires a clear prompt instruction for the AI. Sometimes it might miss one or two things, and you have to go back and tweak it and reword it. Sometimes the AI goes through the conversation and thinks it found the data point that you wanted for a specific field in your JSON, but maybe the user was vague or didn't actually answer it clearly. So instead of maybe asking the user again for clarification or just stopping, the AI might just insert a null value, which is basically like a blank or a placeholder for missing data, into that spot in your JSON output. And then it'll just carry on with the conversation. So you end up without the critical piece of data that you actually needed. It leaves a gap. And fixing things like that, or just generally getting the AI to consistently pull out everything you need reliably, it requires quite careful refinement. And it takes time sometimes with multiple tests to get that just right. You'll likely spend a fair bit of time tweaking the instructions you give the AI in that main AI block. It's a very iterative process. You try it, you test it with different kinds of user input, you see where it breaks or misses things, and then you go back and you adjust your instructions and you try again. And this might happen multiple times. So the exact phrasing that you use in those instructions really matters a lot. The specific wording that you use when telling the AI what to do can make a huge difference in how reliably it extracts the data. For example, sometimes negative instructions, like telling the AI do not continue until you have the user's email, might actually get ignored. Whereas positive phrasing, like ensure that you have captured the user's email or confirm you have successfully extracted the user's email before proceeding, that can sometimes be more effective in guiding the AI to get that structured output reliably. It really highlights just how finicky getting this right can be. And what if you're planning to use that data that you capture with JSON for something else, like maybe having the AI analyze or rate a job candidate based on the details that pulled out? If you're doing that, then you also have to define the parameters for that analysis. So you need to spell out the rating system that you want so that the AI understands what is the rating system. So there are a lot of nuances to using JSON and combining that with good instructing for the AI to get this to work properly. So how do you know which way or which method is right for your particular project? Well, the guiding principle I like to work from is start with the simplest solution first. The information that you need is genuinely straightforward, and users typically give it directly when they're asked, if it's pretty cut and dry. Then use the simple function or a get user data action. Simpler is usually better to start with because, frankly, there are less things to break when you're initially building it out. JSON can definitely be overkill for really simple data capture needs. And you only need to make the jump to JSON if that simple method actually fails you in practice, if it doesn't work. And that usually happens because the real user interactions are less structured than you had hoped. Maybe they involve more back and forth, or you find that you're expecting or getting answers that are broader or have more nuance than just a simple data point. So this choice, function versus JSON, it's not just some minor technical implementation detail. It directly impacts whether the bot can actually deliver the value that the client is paying for. If we step back and we look at the bigger picture here, for builders and business owners, understanding these techniques, being able to actually implement robust data capture using things like JSON, and maybe integrating with other systems using APIs, this isn't just nice to have academic knowledge. It comes directly from the practical need to build bots that work in the real world. Bots that are interactive enough and reliable enough that clients will actually pay good money for them. The ability to handle that complex data capture, like really screening candidates effectively through a nuanced chat, or dealing with all those varied inquiries on a landing page using JSON, and combining that with connecting external systems, maybe integrating with a logistics platform's API to get GPS data for a trucking bot, or hooking into a Shopify for an e-commerce client's bot. That combination lets you create those more complex, tailored solutions that clients desperately need to run their businesses better. These technical integration pieces are critical for delivering actual business value. The whole landscape of valuable AI skills is shifting. Just being able to do basic prompt engineering, that's quickly becoming table stakes, a commodity. The real value, the thing clients are increasingly paying for, is the ability to implement these more sophisticated, integrated solutions that demand a deeper technical grasp. Things like working effectively with data structures like JSON to handle complexity, and using APIs to connect the bot to the rest of the client's world. That's the expertise that commands a premium. Really understanding the back end of stuff, that technical plumbing, that's what justifies the investment, whether you're learning it yourself or paying for someone who has those skills. And mastering these more complex techniques, like really getting JSON extraction to work reliably, dealing with all those potential nulls and tweaking prompts and instructions, that's not just something you pick up in an afternoon course. I can't emphasize that enough, that learning and implementing these advanced techniques properly involves extensive experimentation and testing. It means a lot of just playing around, building things, seeing them break, and then constantly tweaking instructions based on those tests. And one important note about learning and testing: this whole learning process phase, it can be very expensive, not just in your time, obviously, but in the actual cold hard cash too. These AI credits, the ones you pay to run these models, they get used up quickly when you're learning and iterating. Every single time you run a test, have the AI process a conversation, try to extract data using your latest tweaked instructions, that might cost money. So those significant effort and real financial costs that you invest in mastering these technical details, that accumulated knowledge and that hard-won experience, it's a huge part of the value you ultimately bring to the table. This is why it's important to choose a good platform to be on, one that allows for testing and tweaking without additional costs. That's why I build on Chatbot Builder. But just remember, all of this time and money and learning is what clients are paying for when they hire you to build a sophisticated bot that actually works. So, wrapping all this up, what does this all really mean for you, the listener, the builder, or the business owner thinking about AI bots? I think that this discussion into JSON versus simpler function methods really underscores that building AI bots are truly functional, truly valuable for business. And it means you have to get your hands dirty and tackle some real technical challenges, especially around data capture. That choice between methods, it isn't just about technical preference. It's a really critical strategic decision that you have to make based on how complex or structured or unstructured you expect those interactions to be. And mastering these more flexible techniques like JSON and understanding how to integrate using APIs, It's rapidly becoming less of an advanced extra and more of a fundamental necessity if you want to build the kind of sophisticated, tailored AI solutions that businesses genuinely need and will pay for, the ones that deliver a real return. It really represents a valuable skill set, and maybe more importantly, a hard-won skill set. It shows that building effective AI solutions for businesses today isn't just about being clever with prompts anymore. It's increasingly moving more towards understanding and mastering the technical guts, the plumbing underneath that's required to reliably handle all that inherent messiness and the unpredictability of real human conversations and real business processes. So maybe a final thought to leave you with. If, as you're planning or building your next AI solutions, maybe for a client, really think about the potential messiness of the human conversation that bot needs to handle. How are you going to make sure that it can reliably capture the crucial details that it needs? Even when the user inevitably goes off script, asks weird questions, or just gives a long, rambling answer, is there a specific technical challenge in your current build related to getting data out of conversations that might benefit from rethinking your approach? Maybe starting simple is fine, but are you prepared to level up to something more robust like JSON if that simple method starts hitting its limits in the real world, in these real conversations? If you're curious about this or ready to learn more, leave a comment below and have a conversation with my chatbot Sparky, and let me know if you want to join our co-working sessions where we can talk about all of this stuff. You can ask questions, we build solutions together, and learn different methods and strategies for creating powerful tools for you to build for your clients. I hope this was helpful, and as always, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one. That wraps up another discussion on the office hours recap. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. And as always, come on over and join us in the Discord room every week live at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. See you next week.